Hey there, Matt. How are
Hey,
you?
doing great, David. How are you?
Doing all right.
Looking
D-
forward to connecting with our audience once again today. David, I feel like maybe not everybody has gotten to meet us before. So should we start with intros before we dive in and do the agenda? You
Who are
want to
you?
kick us off?
Sure.
Who
All
are
right.
you anyway? Why are you here?
I'm David Gibson, SVP of Strategic Programs here at Varonis. Been with Varonis since about 2006 or so. So welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Matt, who are you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Radolec, Senior Director, Incident Response and Cloud Operations at Varonis. I've been with the company a little bit over 5 years, so not as long as David, but I'm bringing twice the excitement to today's session.
Ooh, the gauntlet has been thrown down.
So, let's go over a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. First and foremost, we're going to go over some ground rules, as I think everybody needs a refresher on, when we're talking about current events, the light that we should cast them in, and what we as security practitioners should do to focus and learn and kind of take things away from it. We'll talk about this big rideshare company breach, along with another one that just broke news of this morning. We'll share a little bit about what we know, what we think you can learn from it, and also some real practical advice of things you could do if you're concerned about that style of an attack. And then we've got a Q&A at the end, and we'll make sure we always spend time covering the questions that either come in from the chat or from the Q&A. Feel free to use either of them. We do definitely prefer the Q&A, but however you want to engage with us, we'll definitely go with it. So first and foremost, I think this is as early as a couple of hours ago. We actually heard, saw on Twitter that Rockstar Games appears to have suffered some sort of network intrusion. Anything further to say on that, David?
My mind is still wobbling a little bit from the fact that they make Grand Theft Auto. And the title of our webinar here today, we weren't.
Which we made the title on Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not prescient. We just play prescient people on TV. Anyway, that it looks like this videos of the new version of Grand Theft Auto looks like they may have been accessible via Slack, and we'll see. It looks like details are still to come here, but that's one of the things that I read out there.
So maybe we'll talk more about this next week or later this week. We'll see what happens, right? So let's kind of just as we talked about before, so some real rules of the road. First and foremost, when a company suffers from a security incident or breach and makes it into public news, blaming and shaming is not the approach. This kind of thing could happen to anyone. In fact, when I think of security practitioners who I've seen speak at conferences and, educate kind of the world about trends in cybersecurity, when I think about fraud detection, I think a lot about some of the employees of this rideshare company that I've listened to and learned a lot from. And so when we think about, talking about breaches, it's better to talk about tactics and techniques and defensive postures than it is to talk about like what went wrong or what did someone not do, or is there blame or shame to be applied. The other thing is, I know there's lots of people that are engaged in our chat. Please don't post links to confidential information like data dumps about employee information or contract information, and really shift your focus on like, what happened? How would I prevent this? How would I limit the potential impact or the blast radius of this? And how would I detect and respond to something like this? If that's where your head is at, I think you're going to get a lot out of today's session. Anything to add, David?
Yeah, just blame is not productive. And, I couldn't agree more. I think, in the spirit of learning and getting better, it's going to be, that's really the spirit that I hope we can get into.
Well, let's crack right into it. So what happened? Why are we here?
Yeah. So, this big breach that's in the news these days of Uber, obviously popular ride sharing app. For me, it kind of boils down into three big parts, and we'll go into these. But first is just how the initial breach happened, social engineering of a user at Uber, and we'll walk through that. But once that user was social engineered and the attacker was able to get into the VPN, they were able to scan the environment and find a file or actually it was a script, I think, with credentials to the privileged account management solution, which basically is the keys to the kingdom. So that's a second big kind of phase for me, is like, okay, once they've got access to the PAM solution, they've got real broad access to the environment. And then the third and final kind of insult to injury is getting access to HackerOne, which has a lot of vulnerability reports, which really could make the damage kind of go on for a little while. But good thing they were quick to issue a statement. So Matt, you want to walk through what they talked about here?
Sure. A few things that again, many security teams we've talked about on previous episodes, how there has been debates over the delay and kind of what seemingly appears to be a security incident and the company issuing a statement. So, here's another hat tip to Uber. They were really quick to share how they're engaging with law enforcement, how they might be potentially, looking into some internal tooling, but also how that it doesn't look like user data as far as the users. I don't know anyone other than me, a big Uber consumer. I'm definitely on the list for using Uber. I think I use it many times each week, and so it's good to hear that things like trip data and user sensitive information wasn't accessed.
Yeah, I think we actually have a perfect rider on staff too, right? He's very proud of that.
Oh man, I think I've taken too many rides to have 5 stars. So just curious, I guess another kind of chance to reach out to our audience here. Do we have any 5-star Uber riders in the audience with us today, or anyone that's pretty close? Maybe that person from the Maldives. Well, let's kind of, you said there were 3 phases, David. I'm curious to see if you could share those with us.
Yeah, according to the threat actor, they
They SC'd an employee.
yeah,
Did they turn him into a sales engineer? Can you help us explain what that means?
SE and sales engineer and social engineering are what's known as common acronyms, right? So but it's easy to get confused. But they social engineered an employee, and apparently they were able to get their credentials to the VPN. Right. So they got the password. We're not really sure how they got to the password. I believe that it was a credential stuffing attack. It's one of the possibilities there, but we're not really sure.
Now, when you say credential stuffing, can you break that down for audiences maybe unfamiliar with the different kinds of password attacks?
Sure. So this is, and you can probably correct me if I'm wrong here, but essentially you harvest a bunch of well-known passwords, and then you try them with a finite amount of accounts, and this is usually done around Thanksgiving, correct?
Wait a second. I don't. These things could happen anytime.
I'm just trying to go with the image on the screen here.
Got it. So now, there are things that you can do to other than having like a strong password policy, using the 4 different character sets, having complexity and length, maybe even doing some dictionary based password checking. There's this service that you can subscribe to as well that can help look for passwords called "Have I Been Pwned?" Do you have any experience with that? Do you have anything else to add here, David?
Yeah, so this is by Troy Hunt. We know that well. I think subscribe to it if you haven't. But it's a great way to get alerted if one of your credential pairs or your any of your information has been showing up in a data breach.
I think it's really important to point out here as well, though, that the employees who are susceptible to be phished are also, from our experiences, just about as susceptible to reuse their passwords. And so, if you get one person to successfully social engineer them, you look and see if they've got any kind of password or some kind of naming convention to the passwords that they use. A lot of this kind of open source reconnaissance is available to an attacker, just as it is to us on the blue team side. Now, I think I want to talk about what I would consider to be like the elephant in the room of cloud or of remote access and these style of attacks, and that's really about like multi-factor authentication, right? You can have multi-factor authentication, but you can have what a lot of people on the Twitter sphere are calling an MFA fatigue attack. I like to call it a DOS, a denial of sleep attack. This is really where you're kind of spamming someone with authentications with the multi-factor, whether it's tokens or it's the push notifications, or maybe it's the phone call, which we've seen, and I'll go over in a couple of minutes. And then eventually you're hoping that employee just approves one of those fraudulent MFA requests because they're kind of fatigued. They just want to stop getting the request. Maybe they think it's their computer. Again, like they're not thinking someone has compromised my account. They're more than likely thinking there's some sort of thing that really needs my credentials right now. So My point in bringing that up, and I really want to drive this home with everyone, is a lot of times when I'll meet with someone and ask them how they might secure, application X, application Y. Maybe it's a SaaS app, maybe it's infrastructure that's hosted by a third party. They're like, oh, we have MFA. And I'm like, great, what else? And the reason really is because MFA, it's not a panacea. As we go back just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about, a big networking and security company that got hit, very similar style attack, where they use this creative persistence, this MFA fatigue, this denial of sleep attack in order to take credentials from an employee's personal computer that had like a cache session token to their work kind of remote access gateway, and then they were able to get in. So we see two, huge tech giants, technology companies, heavy investments in security, where MFA was able to be bypassed. And I think this is something that you're going to see time and time and again, that there's just inherent flaws to the human element of cyber. And so getting someone to approve one of those fraudulent MFA requests is possible. When you think if you got more employees, they're less enabled, these things subsequently become more likely. And I just want to take you back in time. I mean, I think it was months ago, we were talking about lapsus, where again, we coined that kind of denial of sleep attack phrase, where we see things where, they just keep calling them in the middle of the night. You got to press 1 to approve the MFA request. Eventually, someone is likely to cave. And David, as we were preparing for this today, as we were talking about things that people could do, you brought up number matching, just like shout out to someone in our chat named Mike who's talking about number matching as well. What did you mean by that for people who are unfamiliar?
So apparently this is a new feature that you can add, and it's very clear, right? When you try to sign in, instead of just saying, yes, it's me on your MFA, you actually have to type in the code that's showing up on the screen there. So if you think about it, that's going to be tough unless the attacker socially engineers you and includes that code, right? Which if anybody does that, it probably is pretty suspicious, right? But this is I think it's embedding another factor inside this factor, right? So it's kind of recursive factor authentication.
I think another way to look at this too is like this is where you might need to leverage like an evil jinx, and you need to do like a man in the middle to really be able to intercept, replay, and kind of host a fraudulent web server. A little bit less likely than if were even that would be a little bit hard to defeat with number matching. A little bit less likely than if you didn't have number, or a little bit more likely than if you didn't have number matching at all, to actually be able to stop someone with a little bit of that creative persistence again. So we're curious for everybody that's out there. Do you allow push MFA? Again, whether it's like you get a notification, you hit approve, you get a push notification. There's a couple of different popular apps. Does your organization allow MFA push?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was really excited when we first enabled MFA, right? How many years ago? But it's interesting how it's evolved, these attacks, and I'm glad we can silence some of those notifications now, and we have those options.
I also, as we're kind of asking our audience, I just wanted to bring up, a really good comment from somebody in the chat, which was really around, this user experience and how the users get impacted. And what they're saying is people are accustomed to like hitting approve. They're accustomed to this prompt comes up, I need to hit OK, or in order to move past it to do the thing that I'm used to. And so seeing this fraudulent MFA request, they're kind of going back to that conditioning of, I just need to hit approve. I need to continue to do my job. So really great point. And I'm curious if our marketing host, if we can share the results of this poll. Overwhelmingly, we actually have more than 80% of attendees allow MFA push. Now, I know that this concept of number matching is a little bit new, but if you wouldn't mind hitting the chat with yes, we use number matching or something like that. Curious of all of those about 200 people that are using push, how many of them are also using number matching? Now, what happened next? And from the perspective, there was some reconnaissance that happened.
Yeah, it sounds like some scanning of internal file shares, kind of, going out and looking wherever they could for credentials, right, of any kind, and probably other kinds of data that's out there, just accessible once you're inside the environment.
And in this case, like what was it that the attackers found? It was PAM creds.
It was everything that you could kind of hope for. as from an attacker's perspective. I think it's these in a PowerShell script, the credentials to get into the privileged account management solution. And once you're in there, you've got the secrets for all the services that Uber uses.
So like, let's take a step back, right? Like an organization uses a PAM solution because they want to protect credentials better. And so they want to be able to kind of maybe use auto rotation functionality, shorten the time to live of a password so that things like pass the hash, pass the ticket, Kerber roasting are more difficult, right? Because the time it takes you to crack that password hash or that token, theoretically, it might have changed already. Sort of one of the bigger value props there with privileged account management and just using stronger passwords with more convenience in general. But if the thing that gets you into the PAM is sitting in plain text, I think this kind of opens up just like a broader thing. This is probably the only time this happened, right? We think of how often when Varonis and our incident response team, our global forensics team, we do investigations, we often find that it's these default creds that sit out on file servers or sit inside of Office 365 and team sites or even in Slack channels that are the sort of the caveat for lateral movement and privilege escalation. And when you think about it, right, the novelty of this is to not have to drop any kind of attacker tool on that compromised computer, to just use search to try to find credentials or use some scripts to try to find credentials. You really are living off the land and greatly limiting the chance that any kind of antivirus endpoint based signature or behavioral based is going to be able to pick up on the fact that a user is looking for some documents that contain some credentials and then impersonating those users. This kind of really speaks to just how much power exists inside of one of those password vaults and why you have to protect those credentials so much. Because it's basically like getting into the key room, right? Right, David? Like at this point, as well as we kind of think back to when we were creating the title of this, they're probably like 4 or 5 stars should be your wanted level at the point where you've got all the keys and you can start to use them for any of those Grand Theft Auto players out there.
Yeah, this is it's unfortunate that humans actually still have to administrate things, right? And, they need to get onto these things, they need to do these things. All right, where are the keys to that? It's in the key room, right? I think that human element makes it very tough. And if you're concentrating these keys in one place and they're accessible with one other key, then it's that's a tricky situation.
And we're sort of like that all the time, though, because, oftentimes when I think about this, I think about all the session tokens that exist on a particular user's computer, right? Like and if I'm sure most people are attending from a laptop or a desktop today, maybe a handful on a tablet or a mobile device. We'll have to check the stats later. But for everyone who's attending from a computer, with a browser, you've got session cookies and tokens, all kinds of, for probably every app that you use, sitting in memory, on your computer and accessible. And so even without having to break into a PAM, I can probably get into more applications than I originally did. And so when we talk about what is the potential of my account being compromised, we quantify that in Varonis with what's called the blast radius, right? And unfortunately, what we find is that a lot of organizations are very quick to implement security controls from like an outside in approach where they want to lock down their perimeter. But when they think about the damage potential of one individual user and what they could get to, whether it's data or systems or the tokens that they have on their particular computer, it's often something that's truly and really overlooked. And so you had some tips, David, and this is a topic I'm really passionate about, but I'll let you start. Going out and discovering and fixing, plaintext passwords and secrets and keys. How can we help with that, or how can Varonis help with that?
Sure. So this is kind of one of the things that we know that attackers look for. So why not look for them ourselves, right? So we've got a built-in set of patterns and rules to go out and find passwords and secrets in all these hundreds of different file types out there, so that you can kind of find and deal with them before an attacker does.
So what that means is that you could proactively search for these passwords and these secrets and keys that might be stored in an unprotected, unsecured, even plain text way, and proactively kind of limit your blast radius against this part of this attack where they went from sort of regular user to highly privileged user through this privileged account vault, but really because of a plain text password is what it ultimately boils down to.
That's right.
So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. It's one of the many things, when we talk about blast radius, it's one of the many things that if you start to understand where your important data is like this, or intellectual property or source code, then you can start to make sure it's in the right place and lock down appropriately.
So yeah, let's launch our next poll. I'd be curious, and maybe and let's be honest, where are you right now? Not like where you want to be tomorrow, because maybe after this, everybody's going to start to scan for plain text passwords and secrets and keys. But are you doing that now? Are you scanning your systems? You're looking out in your your computers, and you're looking out in your file servers and your NAS arrays and your Office 365 and your Slack and your GitHub. Are you scanning for plain text passwords and secrets and keys? Yeah, and just as like while we're kind of letting people have a chance to respond here, I was actually just kind of out in the Bay Area last week talking with tech companies about this very topic. This isn't the first time where we've seen a plain text password be one of the kind of force multipliers for an attacker. And unfortunately, when we think of all the things that we do for good security, right, we this plays into the same thing as like a developer using a service account and browsing the web with the service account as opposed to a regular user account. Yes, it was convenient for them to do so, just like it was probably convenient for someone to store this password in this script, or there wasn't another option. But what they didn't think about was, by the virtue and the act of doing this, what other risks am I opening up? And a lot of people think about their data as just being like out there and hard to find, but the built-in search in a lot of operating systems, let alone using like an expertly crafted script to do search for you, can effectively crawl through terabytes and petabytes of data to find things like passwords. And I'm curious, let's see where our audience is in terms of scanning for passwords and secrets and keys. It's actually a pretty good mix. So we've got a good number of people that are doing it. It's almost a dead break. In fact, I think it's about 47%, just one or two people more that are scanning versus not scanning. But a couple of people, David, asking us like, what are those? So I think the plain text passwords part, pretty simple. But what's a secret and what's a key?
Right. Well, it sounds said it's really just a longer password, right? It's a secret, right? It's what you would pass to an API, right, to connect one application to another, right? And they're typically just like longer hashes, isn't that right?
That's exactly right. Now, when we think about like the things that you could do, one of the things that you mentioned this kind of like the phase 3 was there was lateral movement into HackerOne. Now, what are the implications of that?
Right. So if you've got, when people find bugs in software vulnerabilities, right? They get, you can post them into HackerOne. So if somebody finds a vulnerability in an Uber application, whether that's an internal Uber employee, well, actually it'd probably be an external one that would open up a bug report in HackerOne, right? Then Uber would be able to deal with that. So this is a little bit like, okay, these are all the issues that, the idea with HackerOne is you're supposed to identify these issues before the attackers do, right? So you can get ahead of them and not have them be exploited. So this is a little bit like, having all the skeletons in your.
Right. So we saw kind of like phase A,
Yeah.
plain text password gets you into a password vault, gets you a lot of passwords. We have, sort of big thing B, which is you get into the database of all the vulnerability disclosures. And now you have all these potentially previously unreleased vulnerability disclosures. So I think what's really, really important here is, a big part of the responsible disclosure process when you find a vulnerability is Varonis Threat Labs actually has a tremendous amount of experience with this. You guys check out our blog. Maybe our marketing hosts can share some of the content or the recent content from Varonis Threat Labs. Typically what happens is you're reporting this vuln. The vendor has a kind of reasonable period to respond to that before you're able to post it somewhere else. And so this responsible disclosure process allows security to be improved, allows ethical or gray hat hackers in order to test and find vulnerabilities in applications and services and disclose them with companies and actually get compensated for it. So when you get into, HackerOne, you're getting all of those disclosed vulns, potentially some that aren't even fixed yet, all in one place. And again, that's another force multiplier and a potential for some lingering damage from this particular incident. And as David liked to point out, akin to like all the skeletons that are in your closet, they're opening that closet door and they're waving right at you. Again, if you can get in and get into that HackerOne database of all those disclosed vulnerabilities. Now, a few people kind of point out, and a bunch of people in the chat as well, but wouldn't they have to MFA into a lot of these subsequent applications as well?
Yeah, you would absolutely think so. I think with all these applications though, they work together. And it's some people have speculated that there was an API key between the Uber systems and HackerOne. I mean, and I think you mentioned earlier when we were talking that you could use that to Slack. So if somebody did a bug disclosure in HackerOne, that would
Could have a post to a Slack channel so that you wouldn't have to log in and view it, right?
yeah, and then it could go the other way too when you fix the bug, right? Maybe that would be updated. So that it definitely would make sense from a workflow perspective to stitch these together. But
that would just zooming out from this, right? Like zooming out from HackerOne, I think that the bigger question here is like a SaaS app, right? And so if you have API access, or you allow all users to have API access to a SaaS app, then once you're able to impersonate the user, you have their token, you can use the API on their behalf for as long as that token is good for. And so these are just ways, and sometimes the API tokens are much longer time to live than a standard user session token is. And then you're able to make the same queries on behalf of the user. And oftentimes this is an area that goes unmonitored and sometimes unlogged and even unchecked, like we talked about before from a blast radius standpoint. So, and again, that's kind of what we mean here. Like you can move into other apps, whether you got into a password vault or you just compromised a computer, because you're going to have all these other cookies and tokens that exist on that session. And then one thing we talked about in a previous episode of the show was the just kind of that creative persistence, where maybe we're just going to use the things that person has, and maybe we're going to use their account to impersonate another account. And this really becomes the danger when we think of cloud, is instead of just password hashes and Kerberos tickets that you have to worry about, you have all these session tokens for all these different SaaS apps that are sitting there and exploitable by an attacker. And these are things of convenience. I don't think they're going anywhere, much like how password hashes and Kerberos hasn't gone anywhere, since the inception of both of those technologies. So, David, as we kind of think about giving some homework to our audience, you really brought up this, as you put it, unpaid advertisement for Varonis that happened recently. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that recent congressional testimony from the former CISO of Twitter?
well, it just sort of highlights the problems that we see people facing today, which is we don't know, or people have a hard time understanding where their data is, where where it came from, what's the life cycle, who has access to it, who's using it. And as a result of the lack of visibility, people get way more access than they need. And so this is one kind of recent example that, really, we didn't pay them to say this or anything, but I think it's representative of a typical blast radius. When we go in and we look at people's data and the different, protections that they have or don't have in place. You want to walk us through what we see when we uncover some of this stuff?
Yeah. So like on average, right, in 2021, Varonis did a number of assessments of SaaS applications for large enterprises and small ones too, and medium ones too. But we're focusing on some of the stats from some of the bigger companies here today. And here are some of the most interesting things. Actually, let me go back for a second. On average, a single application has 40 million unique permissions, or ACLs. And so you're already thinking about like scale and complexity, right? 40 million things to manage on top of the configuration of that particular application. And then we can think about, well, we talk about MFA and how it's not a panacea. Well, it can also be disabled, and it often is disabled for a huge chunk of the user base, whether for testing purposes, legitimate purposes, maybe they're third-party accounts, but not everything is 100% all the time. And MFA is no exception. Another really kind of key thing I want to point out, and I saw some people talking about domain admins or DAs accounts in the chat earlier. A super admin account is more like a schema admin. These are the most powerful admins in a cloud. If we're talking about like a super admin over your Azure tenant, for instance, they could delete everything. They could completely kind of like bring down and change anything. They could make everything publicly accessible. They could flip a switch in your network configuration to put your virtual data center on the internet. There are a lot of power that comes to the super admins in your different, cloud, whether it's infrastructure as a service, SaaS as a service, or platform as a service. And then the other thing I think always really important to point out is just the sheer number of records that are publicly exposed and accessible to others. So this could be passwords and secrets and keys. This could be PII. This could be financial data. This could be health information, but just more than you would typically think. And I think to kind of like just give everyone just some homework to think about when we talk about cloud and we think about security or incident response. Ask yourself, for any sanctioned SaaS application or cloud service or infrastructure that you use, do you know where your sensitive, regulated, or valuable data is? Do you know where your plaintext passwords is, where your customer data is? Are you able to see right now who has access to that information? And can you see who's actually leveraging that access? These things seem so simple, but I'm sure that a lot of you at home are thinking, well, no, I don't know that for my Amazon. I don't know that for the intranet site behind our company intranet. I don't know that for my Salesforce. I don't know that for my Office 365. And these really do become the most important things, because after all, every single attack we've talked about, maybe besides the ones revolving the conflict in Ukraine, the goal of the attack was data, right? Now, when we think about cyber warfare, we get into a little bit of denial of service. We get a little bit of, hurting the will of the people. But by and large, a majority of cyber attacks go after data. They aren't there to just compromise machines. They're there to steal information. And so really focusing on these questions can help you implement a stronger security strategy, especially as data starts to sprawl and you use more SaaS apps, because cookies, hashes, tickets, they're not going anywhere. Secrets, keys, they're not going anywhere. Developers, there's going to be more developers. They're going to put things in more places that are unsecured. And it's up to us as security practitioners to help kind of levy for change or find out where these insecure configurations are and fix them. So I want to take a minute here and I want to see what other questions have come in the Q&A. I want to come over the chat. I think we have one more poll that we want to launch as well, as we're always interested in getting your feedback. Number one, to make sure that the message we shared with you today is on point, and also to see if you guys want any follow-ups from us. So David, let's comb through the chat and let's see if there's anything really, really good that has come in. I actually want to, this very last statement I want to talk about from John. So John has this opinion that exfil is not as significant compared to ransomware. And I want everybody to weigh in on this, because I think this is twofold. A lot of organizations have invested a lot in becoming what I would call operationally resilient, meaning that if a ransomware attack occurs, and as long as it's not huge and widespread, only a portion of their network or a portion of their systems go down, while dangerous, they could recover, right? They have backups, they could roll back. Obviously, you want to make sure you're still eradicating the attackers and not just dealing with the ransomware, otherwise you're kind of leaving them in your network. But I would argue that we don't hear about all of those. But when a breach occurs, right, where you have to notify someone or some personal data was affected, these are the things that carry even potentially legal consequences. And so it depends a lot on your business. I would imagine, like a lot of our manufacturing customers, they would toe that line, where if the manufacturing goes down because of ransomware, that's bigger than if the intellectual property behind the things that they're making and how they're making them showed up on the internet. But I would even argue that some of those executives would say it's 50-50. We need to make money, but the way that we make that money is also part of our intellectual property. And these are things that we care about. Another good comment that came in earlier was really just kind of talking about like the need to reinforce security awareness training. And I think we're never going to do enough of that. But I would also encourage you to sort of like think about monitoring anyway. How can I monitor more to identify when a user who isn't so savvy makes a mistake? And how can I pick up on those things? Am I watching the data?
Yes, I think my dog is watching me do my webinar, by the way. That's what that
I had one of our manufacturing clients chime in. The OT and the IT and ICS systems that we have are the crown jewels. Another one saying kind of counterpoint to that, yeah, but losing our IP can be just as devastating. I think the kind of the core point here is that when you think about a cyber attack, data theft or ransomware both could be pretty devastating. We're going to keep the webinar open for a few more minutes, just in case anybody else wants to come in with some questions. But I think that we've covered everything so far. So I do just want to say, or sorry, go ahead, David.
No. I just was going to echo. I kind of think it's interesting. The availability of systems traditionally has trumped, the confidentiality and sometimes the integrity. But I think we're seeing now with ransomware, they're taking advantage of all of those aspects. Especially the confidentiality more now. And one of the viewers pointed out how devastating it can be if you lose, your intellectual property, right? And,
well, I also think it's important the two incidents we're talking about today, neither one of them are ransomware.
Right.
It's a little bit different than some of the messages that we usually share. And really the last sentiment I just wanted to echo is this show, State of Cybercrime, wouldn't be possible without you, our viewers, our audience. So we appreciate you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for coming in from all over the world and sharing with us where you're coming in from. It feels really great to get to connect with you. We appreciate you guys being here, and we hope you enjoyed the show.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt.